So yeah, my name is Cal. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Wexley School for Girls. It's a little ad agency down the street. We're 35 people who have been doing it for about 10 years now. And I don't think this is really the place to talk too much about the agency, so I'm not really going to do that. We're going to talk a little bit about rebelliousness. And I've borrowed a couple pieces just to sort of enhance the talk a little bit from other talks. But I was going over what over the last couple weeks what I wanted to talk about today and how it was going to take shape. And it's obvious to me after talks that I used to do years and years ago to talks now that I'm the CEO. I made the transition, and almost all my talks now, the last 2 years, have this big disclaimer. So it used to be go be crazy and do different things, and now that I'm more focused on developing the business, I'm like, maybe don't listen to anything that I have to say. This is really no different. When I was asked to talk a little bit about being a rebel or being rebellious, I got really nervous. I got kind of panicked because the rebel almost always dies. Rebels get killed all the time, and they go into this big blaze of glory, and then they get their, the first crusader through the bush is always the one who gets his head chopped off. Things usually don't work out for him. So the internet, which I'm going to talk a little bit about today, showed me that these are the 10 most significant rebels of all time. And there's some familiar people that you might recognize: Spartacus, William Wallace, Pancho Villa. But 8 out of 10 of these guys were either assassinated or burned at the stake or died in battle. So 4 out of 5 rebels die. Only 2 of them lived out their lives and died of presumably natural causes. And the thing that is a little bit more alarming, and this is going to be crappy for a couple of minutes and then I'll pull out of this death spiral, is that it happens in almost all walks of life. The people that we paint with the rebel brush, actors and activists and politicians and musicians, they get killed. And so maybe that's not the best way to do it. So I was like, well, maybe we won't do a talk about rebelliousness. And here's 2 of my favorite rebels. There they are. Like the biggest rebellious move of all, it's like, later, bitches. So that was kind of celebrity-like, kind of high profile, and it's actually a fascinating study. Philip Seymour Hoffman got us thinking about it. Us people in the creative class are incredibly self-destructive, and that's a different talk for something that is relatively unresolved. But I was thinking about, okay, so in my life, because I'm not at any level a celebrity, how have I ruined people's lives? And this is the School of Visual Concepts. So 10 years ago, I used to teach there. I taught a couple folks, and I realized in going through this at the time when I said, go zag when people are going to zig, and that I probably made hundreds of people completely unhireable. I only know that Thomas has a job, that's it. And I probably have taught 30 or 40 classes. Advertising is a system, and you kind of need to work within it, or you're not going to get a job. So the preface, this could really screw up everything. There's a pretty good chance that you paid for parking and that you drove down here, you got in this seat, and I'm going to ruin your careers if you listen to what we're talking about today. Well, let me show you this other one of my favorite rebels. It cost him his career as a pizza guy. Did not go back to Sal's the next morning. So we'll exit the disclaimer because you're here, because you're creative folks. I'll take my CEO hat off now. You're a creative person. You probably didn't choose to do that. It probably just happened to you, and your career chose you more than you chose your career. Creativity spans across all kinds of levels of employment. So let's look at why. I called a buddy of mine, a psychologist. His name's Dr. Eric Fisher. You might recognize him whenever something crazy happens or somebody goes sideways on CNN. He's often the guy that comes on and says, well, his neighbors thought he was nice, but it was his parents. His parents screwed it up. And I talked with him about it's a criminally oversimplified version of what I think creative people have and what creative people are sort of dealing with. We have a very low pain tolerance, I think. So we eventually, sooner than most, get sick of people telling us the way to do things and how things should be done, and even just following the right courses to get things completed. So we find our own way, and that's why we do interesting and new and different things and paint executions with our brush. And he sort of patted me on the head. He said, that's kind of cute. And maybe a little bit accurate, but he said, let's look at the creative class in general, and these are traits that all human beings have, but most certainly we as creative people do. He says that psychology tells us that we really have the desire to look good. There's 3 important things he points out, and one of them is the desire to look good. We want people to come up and tell us that we do cool stuff, cool and interesting things. We want people to be happy for us, and we want people to admire us. And one of the big misperceptions about rebels is they rarely go it alone. Rebels always have a posse. They're very insecure. They want people to stand around them and say, yeah, let's do it, I'll do it with you. They might find a different course, but there's a huge desire to look good. There are no loner rebels. And the second thing that he pointed out is that we have a tremendous need to be right. And it's not the I'm right and you're wrong. It's that we think that there is a way that things should be done. We think that whatever the course is, the way that things are being accomplished, it's not necessarily how we want to do it. So whether it's in photography or design, it's what leads us to leave our jobs and start our agencies and follow our follies, because we want to present what is our right way and then have people be impressed and say, nice job, because we did it that way. And the final thing that I was talking about with him is the necessity to win. Creative people work through a system, and when you get a job, you eventually position yourself in a place where you can have the opportunity to show the work that you've done. You have the opportunity to present the things, your creative products, where you want people to engage with them, and that's because we want to win. That's what winning looks like for us. We get painted with the rebellion brush, but in fact, we just want to have our victory, which is the chance for things to get seen. There are a lot of different paths on the road to get things seen, and my path was going the path of least resistance, which I often do. And for me, that's communication. My exercise in creativity is getting the word out and communicating different messages. And so I'm going to go on a little tangent here and talk a little bit more about the internet, because I need to establish the opportunity that we have in creativity, because we can only be thoughtfully rebellious in communication because the human race is so horrifically lazy. We try and find information, or we think that we do, but we're not particularly good at it. We've been conditioned into being super lazy. We've been conditioned into looking the same places. We're getting lazier and lazier. Reporters are getting lazier. Information seekers are getting lazier. And whose fault is it? This is Google's fault. I usually blame Microsoft for things because it's usually their fault, but this is entirely Google's fault. They'll be the first to tell you when the world wants information by far and away, we are the leader. And it's true. It's because it's so easy. How easy is it? So 3.8 billion searches per day on Google alone. That's 2,638,888 searches per minute. It's incredibly, incredibly easy on Google. 43,000, almost 44,000 searches per second. When you bring in all the significant search engines and you roll it into one giant clump of people lazily searching for information, I'm one of the 8 people who use Bing, so I threw that on there. It's nearly a search for every person in the world every day. I'm going down this path not just to show volume, but to show ease. We barely have to lift a finger to try and find out, or as general people, to try and find out things that we're searching for. So here's the problem, and then when I did this slide, I was like, this is not actually the problem. this is a fantastic opportunity for us creative types to do something interesting. But illustrated, the problem is that 80% basically of people in the Google study that I was looking at, they don't look past the third line of search. That looks sort of like this. So if you look at this, if you look at the results and how they track the results of searches, if you're not in the top 3 lines, you're basically statistically insignificant. So we look for something kind of interesting, we assume that that's the case, and we give up. Anybody with a little bit of gray hair in here probably had to write a term paper with the World Book, encyclopedias, and it's the society is the equivalent of doing a thesis and just assuming that it's correct based on a single source. I like eye tracking surveys, both because they tell a lot and because they're really kind of creepy. But the top 2 searches on Google, those are paid location. The third is more interesting, and you can tell it's more interesting because the red, the darker that it gets, that's where you spend the most time. You're burning into this location. And so the top 3 are basically anything that gets any reference at all. People barely look at the ad stream. We sort of know that that's the case. People aren't getting new information. The sort of bad news is that Google predicts what they want based on your clicks before and what you've done previously. So they'll force up information to the top, thinking that they know what you want, and combine that with search engine optimization. It's about as lazy you possibly can get, but you're going to get information in the same way and from the same channel, and we're all going to get basically the same stuff. It gets more interesting to me when you move past Google and you move past what Google does. Adding to the laziness, YouTube, which was designed, I was so psyched when it came out, you could explore and do new things and find new people and look at the way things are being executed and actually get the visual of what a search engine should be. It's become the world's 2nd most popular search engine. It's added to the laziness because we're conditioned, we basically treat it exactly the same way. Now we all, well, people in design know that page layout, this is a certain formula that your eye naturally follows, but search engines have designed their pages to be most effective and sell ad dollars in this same basic way. So we find relevance still basically only in the top 3 or 4 videos of the things that we're looking at. And so as YouTube has become a search engine, it also, based on the number of likes and the clicks and the things that people have seen, it's also feeding us information in the same boring and trite ways. And the most interesting of all of them to me is Facebook. So we have over 1 billion users on Facebook now, making it the 3rd largest country in the world if it were a geographic location. And it should really be, our personal snowflake. We should have no 2 Facebook pages alike because I have a whole different set of friends. If you have more than 1 friend, you should have the most unique group of information and gathering of your friends. Now, people do spend more time on Facebook, but it's interesting how within the first few minutes of of looking on Facebook, unless it's really late and you're kind of Facebook creeping and stalking people, you're really going to do the exact same thing because we've been conditioned to treat this way, to act this way on search engines. Eye tracking tells us that this same crap of getting information is happening. So what does that mean then? When I said that it's a good opportunity, what I meant by that is we actually have people still want to be entertained and they still want information, they still want to find interesting stuff. It's really fantastic news. It's never been easier to stand out in the clutter because there is so much clutter. Being thoughtfully rebellious allows us to apply our messages and designs in photography in ways that we can find unique things and unique messages. And we can do population of opportunity is actually because when they look at the same spot for information they're going to get, they're more interested and willing to participate in something that is thoughtfully rebellious, maybe something a little bit like this.
I am with Speedy Pinata, which is, Speedy is a word that means fast. Pinata is it's like a papier-mâché doll filled with toys. And we deliver pinatas to children for their very special occasions. Started out as a stuffer, moved my way up to a delivery man. It's a growing business. But there's been a few setbacks, but that's the business world. I've been at this company for about 2 years. It'll be 2.5 in 6 months. I've always loved pinatas, but I never was able to enjoy them myself as a child. I have a problem with spatial relationships. some people only give 110%. It's not enough for me. I put in like 115, 16, minimum. Santa Claus gets a lot of the hype, but the Piñata Delivery Man is sort of like a modern folk hero. They'll give me cookies and milk, and they'll give me some of the candy from the piñata. And the first thing in training you learn is the left-handed Winchester knot. That's not going to move unless something really yanks at it. Oh. It's not a big deal. It happens all the time.
So the opportunity to be unexpected where people are not looking for it is where we get our best chance to flex our creative muscles, where we best get our chance to be a little bit rebellious. And in doing that, we started a tiny bit late, so I'm going to scurry through this next section because I'm most excited about the question and answer part, and we can turn this back into a conversation because I don't need to stand up here and just ramble on. We ask the people when we do our communications, and I ask my staff to worry about what we can control. If we're going to assert some rebellion, we need to follow some simple guidelines. A lot of people know Wexley because we launched the Sounders 5 years ago, still work with those guys. It was a really good and interesting opportunity for us to embrace the city and do create some opportunities for it to be a unique fan experience. If you've been to a Sounders game, we like to think it's like nothing else, no other sports event we could offer. And that happened because from the very beginning, we could have no control over the effect of what happened on the field. So being sports fans, we sort of initially started in the trap, well, if they're no good, nobody's going to go. But that's not true. The opportunity that we had, what we could control was, could we give fans something to hold up in the stands? Could we give fans words to songs to sing? Could we give them a chance to turn it into a unique experience in the building and not have anything to do with what we couldn't control? It was one of our big learning lessons from the beginning. We also try and solve the problem first. It can be kind of overwhelming when you get all the different assignments that you could have, and it's the big white canvas, and you can do a whole bunch of interesting things for sure, but we need to worry about our resources second. What is the problem? What is the issue, not just in marketing, but in communications? What are we actually trying to do? What are we actually trying to message? So this is something that's almost 10 years old, but Mad Mothers Against Drunk Driving still does it. This is painted on the parking lots of the high schools the night before prom here in town. Every 48 seconds, a drunk driver makes another person eligible to park here. The rebellious opportunity we had here was not to put a poster up on the wall where, when you look at the eye tracking surveys and studies, that kids will just ignore it. The opportunity was also to talk with Mothers Against Drunk Driving and say, let's leave the logo off because these teenagers already have one mad mother, and you don't want to force another eye roll here, but we can find an opportunity to be a little bit rebellious in our messaging and put it someplace where it's not expected. So they're a little bit disarmed. They're willing to be entertained. They're willing to be engaged. You just have to find where that communication can happen. And the last thing that we ask all of our communication and all of the people creating communication for us is to live in authenticity. Rebellions catch on because there's truth in the cause. It doesn't have as much to do with the leader. Certainly the leader gets things started, but the catalyst for anything moving forward is truth and authenticity. That's when things start to take their own path and they start to do, you start to have more interesting results because you're not trying to make things up. If you make things up in this society, in this day and age, people will just kind of blow it off and dismiss it because the truth has never been easier to find. If you're really looking for it, it's a consumer culture. And consumer, I don't mean somebody who buys stuff. I mean somebody who's transactionally taking information from you. So if you're not authentic, you'll lose that person forever. And the last thing that I like to ask of people of our people, of everybody, is if you truly want to be rebellious, then be the best part of someone's day. We're all so focused, somewhat selfishly, on making sure that our day goes fine, making sure that we can get rid of the barriers that are in our way, and we can try and do things to make life just move the way that we're hoping that it should. But if we change our perspective, and if we decide that the most valuable thing we can do is be the best part of somebody else's day, that's rebellious, because nobody's expecting that. If you're the best part of your barista's day, if you're the best part of the chick that's giving you the parking ticket, if you're the best part of your boss's day, then we'll start to knock down these barriers. We'll start to learn things a little bit differently. We'll start to communicate in ways that people are more receptive. We can start to break down those eye traffic patterns, because we can have people rewarded by participation and engagement with individuals. That's what we think is probably the most effective way to be rebellious, is to change other people's lives for good. I ended on the second where I wanted to end. That's never happened, so thanks for not being disruptive. This is the part where I think we take a 5-minute break. We've got about 15 minutes for questions after that, but I like the idea that you guys get to think for a second, because normally I'll say, does anybody have any questions? And then everybody sort of sits on their hands for a while, because you kind of don't, but then I kind of, you kind of feel like a jerk because I'm just standing up here. It's like, how's it going? I wish I had some hold music, but I do not. So let's do 5 minutes and then come back and do a little bit of a Q&A before they kick us out of here at 9:50. All right, thank you. All right, let's kind of bring it back together. We're going to probably just do this 10 or 12 minutes before we get kicked out. There's something happening in here right at 10, probably like a wedding or something, so we need to pop out. But now, are there any questions or thoughts that we can talk about from the last couple minutes? Yeah?
How are you doing?
Thank you! Whew! Thank God, I love the icebreakers. I'm doing all right. I can't believe that ended where it was supposed to end. Maybe a little bit hungry. Yeah.
I love your notion of making it a good experience for people, because we are all so bored and so lazy. And I was just wondering if I wind up having to do a lot of presentations to very bored audiences and having to wake them up. And I'm wondering if you have any ideas or any things that you've done to wake up an audience.
Yeah, sure. 10 minutes ago I played a totally irrelevant humor video. I don't know. Because there were some snoozers. I was going to just scoot right past that. Now, I'd like to think that wasn't totally irrelevant, but we fall into the same situation, and we'll be in a pitch meeting that's not going particularly well, and people are texting, and somebody's on their laptop, and hopefully nobody from my team. And it kind of, you just sort of feel the energy. I was talking earlier about momentum and how important it is. I'm on this big momentum kick, and when things are going particularly well, momentum is a good thing. But if something happens in a bad way, it's way easy to just get off the boat. Johnny Carson, when he retired, people stopped watching late night TV because they felt an obligation to watch Carson, or you would be a rebel and you would watch Letterman. Then he retired, and late night just plummeted because there was an opportunity to get off that train, and momentum totally stopped. Bad momentum is the same. So when we're in a meeting and things aren't going particularly well because people are bored, we try and do, at that point, I figure we've already lost. There's not too much I can do that's going to make it worse. So we'll try and do something disruptive enough to call somebody out in a fun and interesting way, to talk a little bit about what they're wearing, or why they made that decision, or to just sort of stop the meeting and say, I'm going to go off someplace different. Let's end the bad momentum, and let's just have a conversation about, you know what, I know we're going to do this presentation, but I saw something on TV last night, and anything to change momentum change bad momentum, is the opportunity to restart and to get attention back. And so that's kind of what we try and do. And I wish we were better in practice, because at the end of the meeting, it's like, damn, that was the perfect time to take my shirt off, which I've only had to do like once. But that's kind of what we look for. I think we all can feel when things are, it's like going on a mediocre or bad date. You know that it's not going to happen, but the appetizers just got there. So you're going to have to do something a little bit different to change how the next 45 minutes are going to land. Orange. Yeah, it's under the blazer.
Internal orange, got it.
Internal orange.
I want to know how you reconcile or design to avoid situations where consumers or whoever's the target of your advertising react against that sort of let's be disruptive vibe. The example that is in my mind is like lately Pizza Hut took out an OkCupid profile and they kind of jiggered it so that they're 100% compatibility with everybody. It's like this snarky little advertising thing, and it's really polarizing. Some people find it hilarious, and some people are like, "Oh, brands on my online dating, screw you!" Like,
Yeah.
how do you handle the reaction when people are rubbed the wrong way by this kind of disruption for the purposes of your client?
Yeah. The question is how do we recover from things going sideways if people don't like something that we've done disruptive, or even if we're just being disruptive for disruptive sake, which I don't think works. There are a couple things that we try and do. One is we see who we're really upsetting. So if the concern is coming from a 45-year-old mother of two who is getting Smith Brothers delivered and shops at PCC, and she's the one who's upset, she's not really the person that I care that much about. I don't want to ruin her day, but at the same time, she's not going to order a Pizza Hut. And if a high school kid spends 15 minutes and interacts with it, then I can make the argument that it's like music. I don't like everything. I'm not a big country person, but there's a zillion people who like country. I'm not that target. So if I can let the client know, look, some people are just simply not going to like this. And what's difficult now with social media there is now you're going to know. Because years ago you didn't. And I just told you that was an anomaly. But now you have a bunch of people on your Facebook page telling you that you're a dipshit. So we're going to have to be prepared for that. So we do a lot of upfront work. But I will end with that thought with saying we just are authentic. And if it's authentic for Pizza Hut to open a dating profile because they're trying to get new relationships going for their pizza and it's landing, then that's how it goes. Then it worked. And if that's not in their personality, then they're going to get called to the carpet on it. Wrist tattoo.
What do you feel is the sort of most recent rebellious trend, probably like in design or communication arts, that you feel is effective? I'm sort of thinking back to like how guerrilla campaigns or strategy was like really popular a few years ago, but
Yeah.
isn't really talked about so much anymore. Is there any recent like rebellious trends that stand out to you?
I don't know what it's called, but I like the yarning of trees. I think that's awesome. They stole that. I don't, guerrilla marketing has become kind of cliche, and consumers have become desensitized to it. So I actually don't really have a better example of marketing that I think guerrilla-wise has worked. I mean, we do stuff once in a while that people respond to, but really in design and graphic communication in general, being pleasantly disruptive, I think is fantastic, and people talk about it. Everybody laughs because they've seen it, and they think that it's ridiculous that I like that, or they think it's ridiculous that you also like that. But that's where we've been in a place where we kind of recognize something, and we can be active with an event or an action that's kind of cool and not expected. Upstairs.
My question is, it seems like in the design world, and I'm in the snowboard industry, it's like everything's been done. Everyone has seen, like, it used to be where you could just put distress type on something, or a skull, and people were like, ooh, that's rebellious.
Like an actual skull? That is totally rebellious.
authenticity with irony?
That's a good question. How do you balance authenticity with irony? For me, some of my closest friends are sarcastic and ironic, and it's sort of true to their brand. And so that's still, to me, I think you can be authentic and also be ironic because you're coming from a personality place. What I thought you were going to say is that a lot of stuff has been done, so it's even more difficult to be interesting because there are skull stickers on everything from lunchboxes to Hello Kitty to probably Pizza Hut's website. But there are always new opportunities and new places to do things that are interesting and rewarding. And if irony is inherent in that because you're doing something in the middle of the street where it hasn't been done before, then I think that can also be authentic. What we're doing now is we're asking consumers to participate with brands and with engagements in places that will build that brand. I don't think brands can be built anymore if we're going to go down this marketing conversation. I don't think brands can be built with TV, radio, and print, and even traditional marketing. Brands today are built with what is the social media presence, what's their Facebook presence, what's their Twitter presence, not just what they present, but how are people using them in the conversation, how are people presenting and representing that brand, in addition to all the marketing and the things that they do. So that's now how we look at things, is how people engage with them more than ever. So with that, being in unexpected places, if that's ironic enough, then I think that you're starting to check the box and do unique branding type things. In the middle.
We find that brands have, I guess we probably all agree here that a product is good enough generally will sell itself, like Apple.
You'd hope.
Do you find that over your history, advertising is commonly meant to prop up things that are really great or things that might not be as great? So have you found that products have gotten better over time in advertising, that where it makes your work easier or harder or?
That's a cool question. The question is, on the premise that a good product, if we'll borrow Bezos for a second, who said famously that advertising is the cost you pay, it's the consequence of having an unremarkable product. He's backed off that just a little bit. So the fact that products are better or we can target better people, it's more interesting for people to use them. Does that make advertising easier? I think it kind of does because the consumer these days with just about anything is more experience-based and want to see how they engage with something as opposed to, and what it means to buy that cereal is it's badging now. And so that there's a little bit more of an engagement, and they'll do it with little Fitbits and stuff. Fitbit doesn't advertise for the most part, but people sort of know what it is because I try and get my steps. It's actually why I'm doing this right now. I think that advertising has gotten easier in terms of finding the unique things about products to message, but has gotten more difficult because the consumer has more walls up than ever because it's coming from everywhere, 5,000 messages a day, most of which you don't want. So even if you have an interesting product, a unique proposition, a fun engagement, the barriers, the walls are already up. It's hard to get through there, especially during traditional methods. So the challenge is no longer to me with creating products or making them more remarkable. It's trying to get that engagement with the people that would most benefit from using them. Yep.
We've seen a very large growth in the social landscape, especially for brands. My question is, what's next and how do we remain authentic in setting?
Yeah. I wish I knew what's next. The question is, what's next? When we first, a little bit of history, when we first opened Wexley, we were two guys and a dog that bit people, and then we were making little YouTube videos that got emailed, or little quick times that got emailed around, and that's what viral videos were. And then YouTube got invented, and we doubled in size. And people said, "You guys should be a YouTube shop. You should make viral videos." And then 2 or 3 years later, that got a little bit more passé. But social media showed up. You should be a Facebook shop. You should make Facebook apps. That's the future. And so we grew again, but we didn't predict any of those things, and I have no idea what's next, and if I did, then I would invent it and IPO it. But I think what we as marketers will have to notice is opportunities of where we can be interesting. So if Pinterest is new-ish and that's a chance to do something cool, then we take advantage of it. The most successful communicators in general take advantage of the mediums that are presented to them. So I don't really know what's next, but I know when something comes and has its own inherent interest in people's engagement with it, then we kind of need to be there if we're there for the right reasons. We kind of need to be there because we believe that we can't create crowds. When we have an event, we'll do it where there is already something. We'll do it at South by Southwest, or we'll do a fun little thing, non-marketing thing at Burning Man, because we already have the masses. We have people that are interested in being there. So we'll follow the trends and go where people are going and do something interesting there. I don't know that we'll be able to predict what's next, but we will be able to predict that there will be something, and we better be there and communicating if we want to be relevant. Red.
I was wondering, so you're talking about a lot about informational transactions and how technology acts with that. So do you see, as we're kind of getting closer to a lot more connections, kind of the valley of the uncanny, that there are any privacy issues that have come up with you of how people interact with things that you put forward to them, the information you know about them, and how that responds based on the location or on technology that you use?
I have no idea why, but I don't understand why, as a population, we're not more concerned about privacy issues. I guess most people will say, I don't do anything wrong, so I don't care what they got. But I heard on the radio the other day that there's a 100% chance that your search engine knows you better than your own family does. Which is true. Now, why we don't react that way, I'm not too sure. You know the story of Target. I'll paraphrase and butcher it, but my understanding is there was a girl in New Jersey who, based on her purchase history at Target, started to get coupons in the mail, and it revealed to her dad that she was pregnant. Because they'd looked at her purchase patterns and what she was buying, and then they started to optimize her purchase cycle. That is an incredible invasion. But at the same time, we're just kind of like, Google reads my mail. That happens. That's kind of a bummer. I'll just try not to say anything interesting. We're not the kind of place, maybe we're not intelligent enough to use the information that's provided to us for consumers. We are kind of a gut feeling place. So I'm not concerned about us being in a spot where people said, how did you get here? How did you know what color my underpants are? But I am fascinated at how we as a culture and as a community just don't care yet. I guess I don't know what it will take other than something kind of significant, but some marketing outs and a fair some guy is having, that probably is going to be a bigger deal. But we just don't care. And it's silly. Scarf, zebra scarf.
When you're assembling a team,
Yeah.
you want a team of collaborators or rebels?
That's interesting. When we're assembling a team, and I expect you're talking about when we are starting a project, or maybe it's just staff in general, do we want collaborators or do we want rebels? It's easy to sort of cop out and say both, because we need to think that way. But I would take, I feel like you can teach collaboration, and you can't teach rebellious behavior and rebellious thinking and different approaches. I think that is just a given skill. So if I'm put on point to build a team, then I'll take a bunch of rebels because I feel like I can teach them how to work together. As I said from the beginning, rebels are not loners. They can't be loners. They don't want to be loners. They're not out on their own. They want people to appreciate what they do. They always have a posse. So I can teach collaboration to a posse, but I can't teach thinking. I can't teach thinking differently. Let's do one more. Right in front, patiently.
What has been your most rebellious move to date?
Whoa. What has been my most rebellious move up to date? You're going to have to ask my search engine. I don't, I think that anytime we make, I think that for us, it's a career decision. For us creative people, it's a career decision because that's what's going to affect our lives the most. So in hindsight, it probably wasn't rebellious at all. But when I was first getting into advertising, I was working at a terrible, terrible point-of-purchase direct mail place in Chicago. And I was writing the words that you now see on end cappers at the grocery store, Milky Way. I was working on Milky Way, and it was like, yeah. And but I was making all of like $65,000 a year, and this was cash, right? I was 24, 25 years old, and my creative director there said, you have the potential to be good at this. Right now, you're terrible. And you'll grow into even more terrible levels that you don't even know you have. Or you can go down to ad school. So, and I was a reporter. I wrote for the Chicago Tribune for a year. So coming out of school, I made $19,000 a year. Now I was making $65 just 4 years later because I sold my soul to the advertising devil. And she said, you need to go to school, and then when you're done with that, you lose your $65,000 a year job, and you're going to come out here after school. You're going to work at a creative place. You're going to make like 28. I was like, you are nuts, because I'm just making shit rain right now. But it was at almost 30, I think, turning my career over to do something more interesting. And although I don't know that that's the most rebellious, I expect people in this room have done the same thing, and you make those decisions because we're going back to the beginning. We're always looking for what our win is, and we're looking for an opportunity to be true to ourselves and put what we want out for people to see it. That's what our victory is, because it doesn't really pay in cash. I could still be making $65K if I went back to Chicago, but that's where our wins are. And so probably everybody in this room and all creative people, you find those wins, and I think that's what rebellion looks like and how rebellion comes together. Thanks for squeezing in. This has been fun for me.